This video is an expanded and refined version of the one that was removed by YouTube. There's new content for those who will be rewatching it. I will sometimes pause the original video to provide new insights, refute counter-arguments, or to clarify a point that was made. Oblivion is a game that, to me, is interesting not for its clunky gameplay, nor for its often awkward dialogue, nor for its mundane story, even, but for its aesthetic, for its unique atmosphere, more generally, for its artistic character. It is far from being as unique and captivating as Morrowind, but it does many things well. The way Oblivion depicts the nature of its world has stood the test of time, with its picturesque scenery being pleasant to the eye despite any graphical limitations. There's something special about the color grading of this game, something that makes it look like a rich, vibrant illustration of a fairy tale brought to life. The lush vegetation and the accentuated colors confer to the walls this picture book-like aesthetic. The developers behind the visuals of Oblivion spoke passionately about their work. They truly wished their vision into reality through methodic efforts. It is quite joyful and inspiring to listen to them go on about it.
This color and texture is perfect for some of the textures that we were trying to recreate in the game. I mean, obviously the moss in general is mostly green, but there's lots of other little details here that really help make the textures more believable. You know, there's lots of other little browns in here, lots of little highlights in the green, and just other little random bits of nature. I've always obsessed over natural foliage and just greenery in games in general. For some reason, I think that's really cool. It's just not something that you normally see, and I definitely think it's a fun environment in a game to play in. When you think about all the leaves individually, they're probably pretty close to the same color, but you see them all in a scene like this, there's so much contrast and play of light. In the foreground here is an example of some of our grass that we have in the game. They really add a sense of movement and life. Like, it really makes the ground feel much more organic. A lot of the visual impact is going to boil down from the texturing, from the coloration in it, and then using like shader techniques to try and get the shine and sheen and the cragginess to it, like how the lighting splays across it.
It's really fun because, you know, we go everywhere to find source photographs. Like, we took a day trip to DC one weekend and we just took tons of pictures of buildings trying to get the just the right, you know, stone pattern.
Yeah, so it ends up, you know, looking somewhat boring to you, but, you know, we can take the edges of these stones here on the ground or all the little stains in there and use those and build a whole new wall in the game. Can't get over how much this looks like something in the game. It looks really nice. Even like just the top part of it over there. Actually, a hard thing to find generally is just finding nice patterns, just, you know, architectural details, just things that we can put into a building to give it some more decoration.
The remake, however, goes in the opposite direction. Instead of preserving Oblivion's unique aesthetic, which was carefully created with artistic intent, it strives for a blend attempts at Unreal Engine photorealism. Its landscapes look extremely boring and lacking in personality. It's as though the developers simply skimmed through an asset shop to make them. The lighting is awful. The colors are desaturated to the point where the forest looks like the wrong biome. Some scenes look overly teal, and most look overly orange or muddy, like there is a brown filter applied to the image. The original looks like an impressionist painting. The remake looks like PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds. Some people had an issue with the comparison since there is a dynamic weather and time of day system in Oblivion. So the remaster must have been unfairly presented in different circumstances than the original, which is why it looked so much worse in the video. That is generally untrue. The remaster will always look browner than it should. The vegetation will always look less detailed, and its greens less natural and nuanced. For a specific example, let's compare the sunset of both games. In the original, the sky turns into a beautiful purple, and the image looks picturesque, but entirely natural. The original Oblivion looks quite realistic. It's simply as though the original artist filters the mundane to allow the natural beauty to shine. In the remake, the sunset will always look as though there is a piece-colored filter applied to the image.
I genuinely believe that the lighting at sunrise and sunset does look better in the original version.
Hello.
You'd think one of these is set later than the other, but it isn't. This is roughly the same time, and the new one just looks too orange and hazy. But the old version of Oblivion looks more like a sunset, crisper and more refined. Now I get that a nice sunset can go through a golden hour, but I love the twilight lighting that Oblivions would come with. Like how only the highest up clouds would still be lit at the very end of the day and all that. For science, I really did test the remaster to see if there was a similar looking stage, perhaps post-sunset, but no. It just went to night, and maybe not as smoothly as you'd want it to.
The lighting in this new game is horrendous across the board. The many hours I saw you play this, I don't think I saw a blue sky hardly ever.
No. The sky is like a sickly green because of the piss filter. It looks terrible.
The UE5 piss filter is in full effect here. Everything is yellow-brown. There are locations that should be very vibrant and green and bright that are just washed out in yellow-brown. And it doesn't have to be this way.
This change in art direction alone ruins the visuals of the game, but of course it's far from the only downgrade.
I was born.
The flaws of the comically powerless art direction are most apparent in the opening cinematic. The dark and evil ambience of the original was replaced by a dry picture devoid of weight and contrast. The Imperial City looks way duller in the remaster, besides the obvious lighting downgrade, which harms the atmosphere of the game in general. The moss that was present in various structures is gone, making them look less integrated into the world. The lack of attention to detail undermines the environmental storytelling, since the Imperial City is very old, and the downgraded version does not reflect that in most places. Speaking of lack of attention to detail harming the game's story, the gate to the Dark Brotherhood was butchered. Not just the gate, but the entire scene. The glow coming from the door was neutered. The heartbeat sound was removed. The iconography not only looks worse, why does the skeleton have two-dimensional teeth? But objectively incorrect. There are 7 children instead of 5. Does a hand have 5 or 7 fingers? I guess the developers of the remaster can't tell. I have seen many people who believe the remaster was made with heavy use of AI tools, and stupid assets like this one certainly look suspicious. Either way, what is definitely true is that the new developers do not care at all about Oblivion, and created this as quickly as possible just because they were paid to. It's unbelievable to me how people still fall for the obvious PR speak every single thing behind the remaster spills out about them being fans of the original, and so on. Hell, even Bluepoint has the gall to say they were faithful to the original Demon Souls, when they disrespected the artists and their work while openly claiming they did not understand it. Complementing the map design of Oblivion are the creatures that inhabit it. The roster may seem quite unremarkable at first glance. There's trolls, goblins, ants, ogres, zombies, ghosts. It's what one would expect to see in any fantasy. However, their designs, while simplistic, are sincere. They are elegant renditions of the tropey characters that manage not only to earnestly portray such classic concepts, but to look somewhat unique while doing so. The remake felt the need to strip most designs of their charm. The trolls went from looking like strange, almost eldritch creatures whose stone-like skin and fur look mossy and alien, to ugly, brown gorillas. Their third eye has been diminished in size. The goblins lost their blend of reptilian and chimp features, now looking like the most generic goblin ever designed. The remastered Spriggans now look like women wearing elaborate costumes and makeup. It's like the designers felt the need to remodel their faces after Instagram influencers. The Minotaurs look way less intimidating. Their hollow eyes are now bad guy coded, less like those of an inhuman abomination, and their human bodies were covered in fur, taking away from the chimeric look. The flame elementals look weirdly sexualized. It's quite strange that the artists looked at the original models and thought they should be improved by twisting their proportions to that of a hot girl. Their new design looks tasteless and edgy, while the original creature is more akin to a fiery pixie. To be clear, the issue I have is not with sexualization in general, but with the lack of intent behind the changes. And it doesn't matter that the more recent Bethesda games look similarly generic to this remaster, as I am using the original Oblivion as the baseline. The Storm Elementals too were made more humanoid, losing their squared silhouettes. The makers of the new model seem to lack even the most basic understanding of character design, as they don't understand that geometric shapes can be used to convey personality. Both the scamps and the ogres had their proportions humanized, which slightly undermines the character of the original creatures. The zombies looked like they were ripped out of Back 4 Blood. They perfectly exemplified the lack of artistic intent behind the changes. The charming simplicity was run over by a need to make everything look as generic as possible. To elaborate on why the zombies, and the remaster in general, or rather, even more broadly, Western games, look more generic, my hypothesis centers on the influence of cinema and CGI. Vibrant, vivid colors often look unnatural, or unconvincing when simulated, whereas the saturated, monochromatic tones are easier to make appear realistic. As a result, CGI creatures, zombies included, were often designed with dull, flesh tones, greys, and other subdued hues. Because the gaming industry shares many of its artists with Hollywood, and because cinematic trends inevitably ripple outward, this aesthetic sensibility seeped into games. That's how we ended up with the notorious peas and grey filters that dominated the PS3 era, a time when CGI had firmly become the standard in film. But this approach makes little sense for video games, which aren't constrained by the need to seamlessly blend digital effects with real-world footage. It is quite common for games to inherit a cinematic visual language that was never truly meant for them. Look no further than the disgusting orange and teal color scheme shared by so many derivative, soulless games, or to the overabundance of neon-infested games, especially in the indie scene. That is not to say that 3 obnoxious artistic trends I used as examples look any better in movies, they usually do not. Was this intentional for the sake of making the game from the notoriously casual and entry-level fantasy franchise even more digestible to modern audiences? Or was this a case of incompetence and artistic apathy? Given the remaster was outsourced to a studio based in Singapore, whose portfolio consists of titles which are artistically bankrupt and hyper-commercial in nature, it's safe to assume the latter to be true. Funnily enough, Back 4 Blood is one of the titles they've worked on. When I first thought of the comparison between the zombie models, I did not know that. The cheap realism of the remake's lighting makes the armor sets, which, in the original, were designed as if they came out of a fantasy illustration, look out of place, borderline uncanny. The textures of the remastered sets don't look metallic as they should. They look plastic, in fact. The Legion set in particular looks like a cheap action figure. The boots of this and other sets look cartoonishly oversized and peculiarly polygonal. The Golden Saint set went through the most hideous transformation. Its remastered model is so deformed it makes the player look like a human sausage. Its leggings are completely misshapen, looking tubular in design, which is a rookie mistake, commonly spotted in cheap modern-day armor reproductions. A person would be physically barred from walking in those leggings, because of that anti-anatomic shape design. The armor also doesn't look as golden as it did in the original. The lazy modus operandi behind the remastering of the models becomes apparent with even the mildest scrutiny. Besides the plastic look, the armors are flat and appear glued to the player character. They react inappropriately to their idle animation, inflating and deflating alongside their breathing. The armors were created from a smooth, flexible model to cut costs, giving them the look and feel of a silicone-based costume. Demon's Souls, a low-budget fantasy game made to compete with Oblivion, featured armor which reacted to player movement more realistically in 2009. One strange quirk of the character model I noticed while examining the armors is that his feet look too big, as though he's a hobbit. Another notable downgrade is the lack of female sets, a decision that pairs laziness with censorship. Yes, so-called boob armor often looks stupid, and I'd be mostly fine with tasteful redesigns. But instead of new models, they simply scrapped nearly every female set from the remaster. One consequence of this is that the remastered armors were obviously modeled with the male character, or rather, the body type 2 character, in mind, and weren't properly adapted to fit the female character, that is, the body type 1. The armors are grotesquely oversized for the woman characters, which is baffling considering the degree to which the remaster adapted Oblivion to fit with modern-day political correctness. Some sets are miscolored, despite having the corresponding color in their names. The outsourced developers didn't even pay the slightest attention to details. The model of the Blackwood set was entirely removed from the game, and now, despite still bearing the name, the model it uses is that of the Steel set. The UI has been remade to the detriment of the visual cohesiveness of the game and its setting. While searching for information online, I stumbled upon a dense post written by the user Forward Only, which details each change. I'll summarize some of the points made by that user. The original Oblivion's UI, like the rest of the game, was simple, elegant, functional, fitting for a medieval fantasy RPG. The remaster's UI is cluttered and corporate looking. The font of the UI was a moderately ornate serif font. In the remaster, the fonts are a blend of serif and sans, which makes some of the UI elements look uninviting and unimmersive. The color tones of the remastered UI are cold and bland, in contrast to the warm color scheme of the original. One looks like a pre-built Unreal 5 asset. The other looks like it was carefully designed to immerse the player in Oblivion's world, its sound and visuals being designed around a rustic and medieval flavored feel. The lack of care for the UI seems to be a pattern with soulless modern-day fantasy games. The atrocious Demon's Souls remake comes to mind. The compass, which was fairly unobtrusive in the original, was moved from the bottom of the screen to the top and enlarged. A new and distracting pop-up feature that automatically displays the name of a location the player is looking at was implemented to the compass section of the interface. There's now an opaque text box that pops up in the center of the screen whenever you look at an object or door. This feature, which used to be relegated to small text in the bottom right corner of the screen, can't be turned off or customized. The original UI displayed enemy health as a subtle semicircle above the reticle. The remaster replaces this with a large, red health bar and enemy name beneath the compass, cluttering the center of the screen and distracting from combat. It's a clear step back from the original simplicity.
Stop! You violated the law. Pay the court a fine or serve your sentence. Your stolen goods are now forfeit. Then pay with your blood!
Stop! You violated the law. Pay the court a fine or serve your sentence. Your stolen goods are now forfeit. Then pay with your blood!
The new voices are, more often than not, weaker than the original performances. This downgrade is most noticeable in the voice of the Imperial Guards, which had, in the original, one of the most iconic voices of any video game character.
You've got to take care of those mountain lions! You think you've gotten rid of them all? You do? Well, you haven't! There's one in my basement right now! Go get it!
You've got to take care of those mountain lions! You think you've gotten rid of them all? You do? Well, you haven't! There's one in my basement right now! Go get it!
This downgrade is most noticeable in the voice of the Imperial Guards, who had in the original one of the most iconic voices of any video game character. There is an assortment of miscellaneous details missing from the remaster, as well as many underwhelming visual features I haven't mentioned yet.
But Oblivion did have some quite advanced reflections, especially for an open world game. It reflected a low quality version of the world itself, minus the trees, and rendered to a lower resolution than whatever your game was currently running at. So how do the reflections in the remaster compare? If you ask me, the ripples are too fast, and they have some blatantly drawn on bubbly patterns around your character. What is this, Half-Life 2? As for the reflections, they're kind of better, but with more problems as well. It's kind of the worst of all worlds, because you get the screen space reflections when stuff that it's reflecting is visible on screen, which is then swapped out for a ray traced, well, lumen reflection, which itself is quite intensive and sophisticated, but it lacks the fog. So the transition between the lumen and the screen space reflections is quite hideous and very distracting. And worse still, any trees or stuff in the foreground will still reflect themselves in distant patches of water. On the whole, the water has got a lot more advanced, probably slows down your PC a lot more, but it somehow manages to suffer from even more limitations than the older, more primitive method did. What a shame.
Also, the animations are horrid. Whether it's running, whether it's combat animations, whether it's facial animations, it is straight downgrades across the board, again, from 2006. And what's worse is some of the animations somehow were left untouched. When NPCs eat, when they drink, when they interact with objects, these animations are the exact same. They haven't been touched and they look ridiculous.
And again, I've seen people praising the fact that they put new animations in, like the goofy hit reactions that enemies will now have as you swing your sword at them, but they look awful. So what is the point of adding new if you're not going to do a good job with it?
Right. Well, and that's what gets me. This is a remaster. People weren't even expecting new animations, and you put them in anyways, and they still look bad. And they're arguably worse than what came before. You also have some really bad audio mixing. Whenever boulders fall, they barely make a sound. Or you also have NPCs that whenever you approach them and they're sitting down, if you talk to them, they're super quiet. But the moment they stand up, they're normal volume.
By the 9 divines, assault! Assault!
The audio mixing is crap. That many of the small details that were in the original game have been removed from this game, which ultimately leads to it feeling soulless and lifeless. Let's get specific. In the old game, whenever you would enter into combat with a character, they would have this nasty scowl on their face like they're coming to kill you, because they are. In this game, characters have this blank expression on their face whenever you go to fight them. Or how about Khajiit and wolves? Whenever they're angry at you, whenever they're going to attack you, their ears lower in the original version. That's also gone. These little attentions to details that used to be in the game are gone. Vampires, whenever they sleep. In the old game, they used to sleep like a vampire. They were on their back, their hands were crossed. Now they sleep like a normal person. And oh, and that little speechcraft minigame that you have, characters used to scowl, they used to give these big goofy smiles, they were far more expressive than they are in this game. But all of this is just plain gone.
The remaster made various gameplay changes, some of which are improvements, but others are ambiguous in their inclusion. For instance, health regeneration has been buffed to make Oblivion play more like Skyrim, in turn making a player's ability to plan their journeys less important than it already was, as potions are less valuable. It's also possible to walk while being over-encumbered, further devaluing planning. The fatigue damage system was completely overhauled. The player character races are the same size in the remaster.
Two-handed weapons have been thoroughly butchered. There is no reason to use them. I don't know who thought this was a good idea, but two-handed weapons are so slow. They're so laborious to use. They attack so slowly in comparison to one-handed weapons that I don't see why anyone would use them, ever, for any reason. Somehow, instead of making them better, they made them worse. By slowing the attack speed down so much that by the time I get off one two-handed attack, I could have gotten off 3 one-handed attacks.
And there's not enough of a damage difference for that to ever be worth it.
No, you're at a net loss for damage. Like, it's instead of actually fixing them to make them good, they're like, you know what, we'll just cook them even further.
Now I'll talk about the elephant in the room. Yes, this game too removes gendered language from the character creator. There is no male and female, only body type 1 and 2. In my video about the Demon's Souls remake, I briefly said I find this practice dehumanizing, and some people got confused as to why. One of the reasons is that it refers to human biology, with terms that can be characterized as artificial, quite plainly dehumanizing us. The defense that it somehow validates minorities that do not identify with binary labels of male and female is not very effective, since body type 1 and 2 is also a binary, though a transhumanistic, misanthropic one. It doesn't offer more options for the inclusion of minorities. It only takes away the language that's natural for the vast majority of people. Before proceeding with the topic, I must say that I don't intend to cause controversy for the sake of it. My objective is to inform and state my honest views on the matter. I don't endorse hateful conduct of any kind, only civil discussion. Video games as a medium are a particularly effective vehicle for propaganda. While there are a few academic articles and books that explore the ritualistic, propagandistic propension of cinema, which has been recognized and made use of since its inception, or rather, cinema itself was created with it in mind, there aren't many for video games. But the ruling forces of Western society have certainly realized that notion at least a couple decades ago. Video games have become an almost $500 billion industry. Video games are by far the most lucrative medium and have been thoroughly integrated into mainstream culture. While franchises like Call of Duty have been more blatant in their propaganda, they are Pentagon psyops designed to vilify the enemies of America and to glorify and normalize war. Others have been coerced into espousing sophisticated but subtle, more subliminal propagandistic endeavors. Edward Bernays, who was Freud's nephew, by the way, clearly and concisely explains this phenomenon in his book simply titled Propaganda. Quote, "The conscious and intelligent manipulation of the organized habits and opinions of the masses is an important element in democratic society. Those who manipulate this unseen mechanism of society constitute an invisible government, which is the true ruling power of our country. We are governed, our minds are molded, our tastes are formed, our ideas suggested, largely by men we have never heard of. This is a logical result of the way in which our democratic society is organized. Vast numbers of human beings must cooperate in this manner if they are to live together as a smoothly functioning society. In almost every act of our daily lives, whether in the sphere of politics or business, in our social conduct, or our ethical thinking, we are dominated by the relatively small number of persons who understand the mental processes and social patterns of the masses. It is they who pull the wires which control the public mind." End quote. By chastising those who notice and point out the insidious propaganda of the ruling elites, you are advocating for a highly dystopian culture which aims to undermine the free thinking of the masses. And this is not hyperbole. If you respond to this claim with a variant of, "It's just a game, bro," it's not that deep. Just know you're acting exactly like the golem they want you to be. Social engineering has long been recognized as a phenomenon, and the cultural industry has been a vehicle for propaganda since its inception. Yet you are viciously antagonized if you bring it up to analyze contemporary works of art. Such trends of propaganda are especially insidious when applied to remasters and remakes. They are taking a work of art of the past and applying their self-righteous, propagandistic, or, in cases of Western remakes of foreign works, outright colonial, mindset into a piece that is ostensibly not theirs. It denotes a sociopathic lack of appreciation for art, which according to them must always be subordinated to accommodate the social engineering fabricated by their superiors.
You now make a point of, that's an investment criteria for you.
Well, behaviors are going to have to change, and this is one thing we're asking companies. You have to force behaviors, and at BlackRock we are forcing behaviors. We added 4 more points in terms of diverse employment this year, and what we are doing internally is if you don't achieve these levels of impact, your compensation could be impacted. Okay,
we're doing the same thing.
And so it's just you have to force behaviors. And if you don't force behaviors, whether it's gender or race or just any way you want to say the composition of your team, you're going to be impacted. And that's not recruiting, it is development, as Ken said. And ultimately, it's still going to take time. We're going to have to force change.
To be clear, the system operates like this. Members of enormous corporations like BlackRock and Vanguard, who don't actually produce anything, whose only purpose is parasitic, infiltrate everywhere they can, exploiting the flaws of the modern capitalistic system. As they buy vast portions of shares, they become able to coercively influence the corporations they have infiltrated so they can impose certain agendas. Which is why we see even major Japanese companies, like Capcom and Square, gradually injecting this Western brand of propaganda into their games. There are also companies like Sweet Baby Inc. that do the same thing, but to influence more directly the actual work of the game developers. And if they don't get their way, they threaten artists and producers like an imperialistic mafia. We saw this affect a foreign studio when Black Myth Wukong was victim of a coordinated attack by Western journalists, who are also part of this psychological operation.
Go have a coffee with your marketing team and just terrify them with the possibility of what's going to happen if they don't give you what you want.
And if I can't sell them on, hey, don't do that, I can instill fear by suggesting that once it gets past us, someone else will take them down for this.
Definitely there have been moments. I can think of one in particular. It was a situation where the identity of the characters was fairly important that we get it right. And in this situation, we actually had to have a more heart-to-heart, really foundational conversation about these are some of the experiences that you are necessarily going to invoke, or some of the messages that you are going to invoke, some of the implications you are going to invoke, regardless of whether you want to or not. It's not a question of like, are you doing it well, or are you doing it badly? It's just, it's there. And so here are the options for how that could go.
They are akin to traceless branches, kind of like USAID, Congress for Cultural Freedom, and the Radio Free Stations were to the CIA. This system is also backed up by underlying, globalized initiatives like the Boogeyman itself, DEI, which offer Faustian bargains to the companies operating within this system. Imagine if the world's most powerful and parasitic companies like BlackRock and Vanguard invested billions of dollars into an initiative where Renaissance paintings are taken out of museums and replaced with modernized remasters, which feature the globalized values they once willed into existence. Most people would see their trickery for what it is, but strangely enough, when the same thing is done to movies and video games, people fail to grasp it. When playing a game like Oblivion Remastered, you are coerced into paying the subliminal, psychological toll it demands. You must subject yourself to the agenda that was applied to it. You are made to bow down to people who have been systematically bullying artists to comply with the authoritarian and imperialistic agenda of the most powerful people on Earth, and who hate you, and go out of their way to make that clear. Before concluding this section, I'll point out a detail that too was changed for propagandistic reasons. The statue of Alessia, the founder of the Empire and the saint of humanity, was changed from a depiction of an icon idolizing the feminine qualities of the character to one subverting them. I will now refute a portion of the popular discourse surrounding remakes and remasters. One of the most common responses to any sort of criticism of a remake goes like this: "Stop complaining, you should be glad you even got a remake." This non-argument is beyond stupid. Firstly, it assumes that the people who are making the critique are like them, desperate consumers with no regard for the artistic quality of the products they mindlessly consume. It is such a dystopian, hyper-consumeristic point of view, it borders parody. No, I don't want a random team of people to take a work of art I love and twist it to fit their inferior vision so they can resell it to me for almost full price or more. Secondly, it assumes you should ever be grateful to big corporations who only want to profit from you and engineer your mind. They aren't remaking old works out of charity. They are doing so for easy money. Bethesda obviously knew an Oblivion Remaster was guaranteed to succeed. The phenomenon of remake culture is the epitome of this hyper-capitalistic finance-based system most of the West operates under. Remaking old works offers almost zero risk for the investment of capital. It ensures that a large audience will spend their money on the not-so-new, easy-to remake products, simply due to brand recognition. Modern people's identities are deeply linked to the products which they consume, and the elites are well aware of that. By buying slop after slop, you are incentivizing a self-referential, parasitic non-culture that turns art into caricature and treats the consumer like the idiotic, easy-to-please cattle that he proves to be. We are in an era of remakes of remasters. We shouldn't allow this demoralizing decadence to go on. A non-argument against criticism of propaganda is something like this: why do you care so much about the change of male and female to body types? And the simple response is that I can assure you I care less than the people who felt the need to make the changes in the first place. They care so much as to prohibit people from undoing the changes for even their single-player experiences, as exemplified by Nexus mods censoring and banning most of the mods that combat social engineering. And this is the end of the video. I sincerely thank you for watching. One frequent comment I got was something like, "Download mods and stop complaining," which is somehow even stupider than the previous arguments I've mentioned, since it assumes I would buy the remaster in the first place instead of just sticking with the original. And that's the consumer going out of his way to download mods made by fans to circumvent the issues caused by the greed and laziness of the billion-dollar corporation is expected. Also, the people who say such things are free to not watch this video, which is advertised as a critique of the slop they so dearly love, and stop complaining. And since we're in topic, the remaster makes it clear that you should not even use mods in the first place. The EULA forbids you from doing so. I apologize for the slightly off-topic upload. I am still hard at work on my Dark Souls lore series. I have created a Patreon account and enabled the members feature on YouTube. Supporters of any tier will get access to exclusive posts featuring in-depth analysis of a wide range of fictional works, like music clips and movies, along with original, truly innovative studies on the Bible, arguably the most important book ever written. So by supporting my work, you'll essentially get access to an exclusive Substack-like blog. Those of you interested in the world of the esoteric will certainly find it fascinating.